All right, let's talk about something really cool. We're diving into a design pattern that's making AI agents a whole lot smarter and honestly more reliable. It's called the reflection pattern, and you can think of it as a way for an AI to literally check its own homework before turning it in. Let's get into it.
I mean, just think about it for a second. What if an AI could fix its own mistakes? You ask it to write some code or a marketing email, but instead of just spitting out the first thing that comes to mind, what if it could actually pause, look at its own work, spot the flaws, and then fix them before you even lay eyes on it? That's the big idea we're going to unpack today.
And let's be real, this is a huge deal. Because an AI's first attempt, no matter how sophisticated it is often just that, a first draft. It might have errors, logical gaps, or maybe it just doesn't quite nail what you asked for. This is exactly why having some kind of self-correction is so critical.
So what's the fix? Well, the answer is a pretty elegant solution called the reflection pattern. And all it really is a way of building a feedback loop right into the AI's process.
Okay, so here's the official breakdown. The reflection pattern is basically a process where an AI agent evaluates its own work and then uses that evaluation to make its next attempt better. So it doesn't just do a task and stop. No, it generates a response and then it critically analyzes that response to improve it. It's really about turning a simple instruction follower into a more thoughtful problem solver. And this whole process breaks down into a really simple but super powerful loop. First, you've got execution. The AI does the task, creates that first draft. Then evaluation. It critiques its own output against the original goal. Step 3 is refinement, where it uses that critique to make a better version. And finally, iteration. This loop can run again and again, getting better each time.
So, in its most basic form, it looks something like this. A user gives a prompt, the agent creates an output. But then, and this is the magic part, the agent reflects on that output. It takes what it learned and feeds that right back into its own process to improve the next try. Now this basic loop, it's good, but we can make it even more powerful.
So how do we level this up? Well, instead of making one AI agent do everything, what if we split the work into specialized roles? This leads to a much more robust approach, and it's known as the producer-critic model.
Let's just look at the two side by side. On the left, you've got that basic self-reflection loop we just talked about. Simple enough. But check out the right side. That's the producer-critic model. Here you have one agent, the producer, whose only job is to create the content. Then, a totally separate agent, the critic, comes in to review it and sends feedback to the producer so it can make things better.
So why is splitting them up so much more effective? Well, think about it like this. It's always harder to edit your own writing, right? Because you already know what you meant to say. The exact same thing can happen with an AI. By creating a dedicated critic agent, you're bringing in a fresh, unbiased perspective that is laser-focused on one thing, finding flaws and suggesting improvements.
And really, what this all comes down to is solving one key problem, which is what some call the cognitive bias of an agent reviewing its own work. The critic agent, it doesn't have any of that baggage. Its only job is to look at the result objectively and see if it meets the standards. And that leads to way more useful feedback.
Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, but where is this pattern actually being used? Where is it making a real difference? Let's take a look at some real-world applications where reflection is an absolute game changer. And the applications are just incredibly diverse. You see it in creative writing, where it helps produce much more polished articles. For really complex problems, it helps an agent figure out when it's hit a dead end and needs to backtrack. Even for something like summarization, it can double-check its summary against the original document to make sure it's accurate and complete.
But code generation is probably one of the most powerful examples out there. An AI can write a function, and then a critic, which you can prompt to act like a senior software engineer, can review that code, hunt for bugs, check for edge cases, and suggest improvements. The result? You get code that's way more likely to actually work right the first time. Of course, this extra layer of quality control, it's not free. Like with any powerful tool, the reflection pattern comes with some trade-offs, and it's really important we understand what those are. And this really brings us to the core trade-off here. On the one hand, yeah, reflection gives you significantly higher quality, better accuracy, more reliability. But on the other hand, every single loop of refinement costs more. It costs more time, and it costs more money, because you're making additional calls to the language model. It's that classic balancing act, quality versus speed and cost. All right, so as we start to wrap up, let's just zoom out for a second and think about the bigger picture. Why does this pattern matter so much for the future of AI? Well, here's the key insight.
Reflection really elevates an AI from being just a simple tool that follows commands to becoming a system that can actually reason about its own performance. It's a huge step towards a more adaptable and, well, a more thoughtful way of solving problems.
So if there's one thing you take away from all this, let it be this. The reflection pattern is what allows an AI to learn from its own experience almost in real time. It's the engine that drives iterative improvement, and that's what leads to smarter, more dependable AI systems.
And that brings us to our final thought. Right now, we're using this for things like writing code and emails. But as this ability for an AI to self-correct gets more and more sophisticated, what are the next frontiers? What kinds of complex, high-stakes tasks are we going to feel comfortable handing over to an AI that we know can check its own homework? That's definitely something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.